Now I will do nothing but listen. I hear all sounds running together, combined, fused, or following. Sounds of the city and sounds out of the city. Sounds of the day and night. This quote from Walt Whitman's Song of Myself is the first thing you read in the introduction to Armory Schafer's 1993 book, The Soundscape, Our Sonic Environment and the Tuning of the World. This quote actually does a good job of introducing the subject material, as the book mainly focuses on the consequences that sound brings with it when allowed to run freely in our world. Though the Whitman quote has a romantic tone to it that makes it inspiring and poetic, Schafer goes from there to introducing the more menacing idea of noise pollution, something that he argues threatens various parts of society. Noise pollution, as Schafer puts it, can refer to the unnecessary amplification of elements in our society. Though it can manifest in many ways, common examples are often in reference to industrialization. As society began to utilize trains more often, the loud sounds that these machines made started infiltrating society as well. In many ways, this increase in noise can be purely coincidental and have no effect, but sometimes it has a detrimental aspect. For example, airports placed near neighborhoods that eventually are reported to experience negative cardiovascular development and hearing loss represent what Schafer refers to as sound imperialism, a way that sound placement can distinctly affect experience. He ties all of these observations on modern-day society together through one word: soundscape. This word is important as it will be useful in understanding the way in which we're going to be talking about sound. You might have actually seen this word used before in music criticism, typically to denote a specific atmosphere that an artist captures. Take Akira Kosamura's album, Polaroid Piano, for example. The track you are hearing right now, Venice, is a good way to demonstrate what a soundscape is in music. In this context, the soundscape is not one of the elements, such as the densely recorded piano, guitar, or extraneous sounds, but instead the feeling that is brought up when all are put together. Through this song, Kosamura creates a soundscape, an atmosphere that listeners can engage. I bring this up when talking about Schafer's usage of the term, that he pioneered by the way, because it's a way for us to relate to the word without having to necessarily sludge through decades of avant-garde music history and theory. Schafer coins this idea of soundscape and applies it to our everyday lives, saying that we are all existing in soundscapes that relate to the environment of the world around us. For example, the soundscape of my apartment in which I'm recording this is quite specific. I have the acoustics of a small, Manhattan-sized apartment, but it is defined as well by the constant whirs and hums of radiators and household appliances. Schafer might argue that this is an example of noise pollution, showing how sound imperialism inserts itself into every aspect of our life and society, creating a division between those who can afford to censor these sounds from their lives and those who can't. At this point in the video, you're probably wondering, what could any of this have to do with Disney? Well, we're almost there. However, to get straight into that good old sensory overloading mouse house we know as the Disney parks, we have to make a brief pit stop in 19th century Germany. Because it was in Germany that the composer Richard Wagner, yikes, by the way, used the term Gesamtkunstwerk in two of his 1849 essays, Die Kunst und die Religion und das Kunstwerk der Zukunft. Though this use of the term would popularize it, it's worth noting that it was originally used by the philosopher K.F.E. Trandorff in his essay Ästhetik oder Lehre von der Weltanschauung und Kunst. Gesamtkunstwerk, directly translating to complete work of art or total work of art, generally refers to art that tries to incorporate multiple art forms into one work. A modern simplification of the term might be referred to as multimedia, but Gesamtkunstwerk seeks to not just blend elements of art forms, but completely encapsulate all of them in one piece. Okay, now we can actually talk about Disney.
Want to be free, to be on the move, to go for a hike or whatever you like to do. Do all there is to be done. It's fun, it's fun, it's fun. To be free, fun to be free.
Disney parks are filled with a variety of sounds. Whether it's an opening ceremony, live performers, attractions, area music, fireworks, or even being told on a speaker by Mickey Mouse to leave after the fireworks, It's clear that as soon as you step onto Disney property, sound plays a huge role in the experience. This approach to immersion centers around a stereo surround sound effect. Multi-channel speakers are spread cleverly around to create the feeling that the sound source is hard to identify, therefore leading you to assume that it's part of the environment. These speakers can be cleverly hidden, often disguised by painting to blend into scenery. This multi-channel approach also has a precedent. When Walt Disney was working on the 1940 film Fantasia, the chance involvement of conductor Leopold Stokowski also brought in an interesting development. With Stokowski's general interest in changing the way sound was recorded, one question was brought up. How can we increase the depth of the music and immerse the audience more? With Stokowski's then recent film, 100 Men and a Girl, the production team recorded different orchestral parts onto different film, layering them on top of each other afterwards. Though the resulting soundtrack was still mono, this gave the conductor more power in balancing the sound in post-production, essentially what we would refer to today as mixing. Disney wanted to take this a step further with Fantasia, introducing a new type of sound system he would refer to as Fantasound. An elaborate setup was designed during the recording process, so it would be possible to mix different elements of the orchestra on different tracks. I'm putting a link in the description so you can read more about it, but I will definitely do a more in-depth video on it in the future. After this entire process was done, all parts would be separated onto 4 final tracks, 3 for entertainment sounds, and the 4th for a control frequency that monitored the other tracks. And for each of the 10 different Fantasound speaker configurations, there were multiple speakers placed around the audience throughout the theater, surrounding them in the sound. Here's an example of a Fantasound set diagram. This particular configuration was referred to as the full Fantasound, and used in prominent places such as Broadway in New York City and the Carthay Circle Theater in Los Angeles. Fantasound was taken with the film on a roadshow circuit across the country, and though some would complain about how loud it was, the film was well received and would go on to be known as the first stereo film and the first multi-channel film to ever be released. Fantasia opened up a new world of sonic possibilities, being able to immerse audiences. So, when the idea of putting sound in Disneyland was likely brought up, it seems natural that the technology would cross over. This is the most difficult part to research when looking into early Disneyland audio, as most of the video documentation available online by guests up until the late 70s doesn't have sound, with the only sonic examples being any television broadcasts. Still, these specials don't show us what it was necessarily like on stage in the parks for guests, making it difficult to assess just how much sound was used in early Disneyland scenery. That being said though, more about early Disneyland sound is for a future video. It's also worth noting that though there is no concrete proof of transferring Fantasound principles into Disneyland, the faithful preservation and history behind rides such as Peter Pan's Flight and It's a Small World, specifically their usage of surround sound speakers, suggests that there was a connection between the formats, bringing to life what we know today as immersive dark ride soundtrack. In the following video of Imagineers talking about sound engineering in the Disney parks, Robin Broad brings up a great point.
A composer has to do for an attraction is very different than what they would do for an album, a soundtrack, anything linear, because our shows do not work linearly.
This is true. Though you do travel through a Disney ride in a somewhat linear fashion, on a track with start and end points, the presence of sound traveling in the room has to be incredibly flexible. This isn't unique to the rides that open with Disneyland, though. Evidence shows that the famous Pretzel Dark rides also had sound during their operation in the 30s, but they used noisemakers such as cymbals and did not incorporate recorded sound until using tape machines in the 50s. Giving sound a non-linear purpose is something that Disney did not invent, but certainly brought to new levels of complexity. Because sound is an art form that is mostly linear, meaning that recordings have to have a start and end point, Disney often has a multitude of sounds occurring at the same time from different distances from the ride vehicle and at different points on the track. By doing this, Disney is able to have enough elements overlapping that it's difficult to have a general perception of time and where each recording starts and ends. Though there are some moments where a ride breaks down and the loops ruin the illusion, it generally works well and creates the immersion effectively. Park guests also have to be able to look at any audio animatronic in the room and clearly hear the sound associated with it, while not being too overwhelmed or distracted by a multitude of combative sounds, bringing into play a type of orchestration that's unique to theme park rides. For those who are unaware with the term of orchestration, it basically refers to how you can write for certain instruments in an ensemble so they can complement each other. For example, a violin playing an A and an oboe playing an A are two different sounds, but having them play the A at the same time in close proximity to each other can create the illusion that the sounds are blending. Good orchestration is typically represented in pieces like Ravel's String Quartet, where he is able to blend the sounds very well. Much like traditional orchestration, which relies on blending instruments and writing individual parts that complement the overall group texture, this type of dark ride orchestration involves recording certain sounds that are compatible with others and pairing them with points in a ride's timeline and also physically in the space. This physical element is most important, as dark ride speakers, or just speakers around the park, aren't as confined to certain spots in a room in the same way that orchestral players are in a large ensemble, making the art of placement another layer of the complexity in Disney Parks' sound engineering.
One of the tricky parts about doing audio for these theme park attractions is, with a film, you're focused on one thing. When you're going through a ride, if you look over here, you're going to see what's happening there. If you look over here, you're going to see what's happening there, and the sound is always on for all of it. So you can't just, they're looking there, turn it down, and feature that line. So we have to be really careful in orchestrating all of this, so as you go through, you get just the pieces as you're getting them.
So, what are you to do when the only constraint to your sound is your imagination and sometimes budget? Well, make some rides and, perhaps, wish upon a star. Because at the end of the day, the most exciting reason to talk about these things is to explore how sound can be used to create feeling. This concludes the first episode of Dreamsounds. In this series, we'll be taking a look at how Disney uses sound to create feeling and immersion. We'll be looking at the composition, recording, and history of parks audio, alongside technical setups and perhaps in the future Disney music in general. If you like this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll be putting out a video once a month, and yeah, that seems about it, so thanks for listening. And I've got to get going because I've got to be working on next month's video, which involves one of the most groundbreaking set of speakers used in any attraction of its kind, a tale about some swashbuckling rebels on the sea. And no, not Johnny Depp.